Released by Capcom in 2005, Haunting Ground, also known as Demento in Japan, quickly established itself as one of the most unique and underrated survival horror titles of its generation. And while it arrived in an era while horror giants like Resident Evil and Silent Hill dominated the market, Haunting Ground distinguished itself with its compelling narrative, unique gameplay mechanics, and psychological horror elements. And though it didn't receive the same level of recognition as its contemporaries upon release, over time it has garnered a devoted cult following, with the game since becoming a staple of PS2 survival horror, and it is regarded as one of the best entries in the genre in the past 2 decades. This essay will explore the key elements that make Haunting Ground an unforgettable and timeless experience, from its atmosphere and psychological horror to its memorable characters, particularly Fiona and her loyal dog Hewie. Haunting Ground thrives on its ability to immerse the player in a world steeped in fear and isolation, effectively using its setting to create an oppressive atmosphere that leaves a lasting impression. From the very beginning, players are thrown into the shoes of Fiona Bell, a young woman who wakes up disoriented and alone in a sprawling, decrepit castle after surviving a car accident. The sense of isolation is palpable, as Fiona is physically and emotionally cut off from any semblance of safety. The gothic castle she finds herself in is filled with dark corners, ominous corridors, and claustrophobic spaces. The very architecture of the castle reinforces the feeling that Fiona is trapped, both physically and psychologically, in a nightmarish environment. The castle itself is a character in its own right, exuding a sense of foreboding that makes exploration both terrifying and fascinating. Its designs draw inspiration from European Gothic architecture, complete with grand but decaying halls, ancient stone walls, and labyrinthian passageways. Each area within the castle feels carefully crafted to heighten the tension, whether it's the narrow hallway where you feel cornered or a vast eerie courtyard that feels too open and exposed. The castle's oppressive atmosphere is further intensified by its silence, where unlike many other survival horror games that rely on constant background noise or music, Haunting Ground uses quiet moments to make players feel vulnerable, amplifying every footstep, every creak of the floor, and every distant, unsettling sound. What makes the atmosphere even more effective is this sense of psychological isolation. Fiona is a protagonist who feels genuinely powerless, and the game does an exceptional job of reinforcing this. Unlike many other survival horror heroes, Fiona is not a trained soldier or police officer. She is an ordinary woman with no combat experience whatsoever. This vulnerability makes the player feel just as helpless as Fiona, as there is little means of fighting back against the threats that pursue her. This sense of helplessness becomes a core part of the game's horror, as players are constantly reminded that Fiona's survival depends not on brute force, but on wit, evasion, and the assistance of her beloved dog Hewie. The game's slow burn approach to horror, where danger is ever present but often unseen, creates a haunting atmosphere that lingers long after you have put down the game. Furthermore, Haunting Ground plays with the player's mind by making them question the nature of the environment. The castle is filled with strange symbolic imagery, distorted paintings, grotesque sculptures, and unsettling religious motifs. This dreamlike quality often blurs the line between reality and hallucination, making players feel as if they are trapped in a fever dream from which there is no escape. The game's world design ensures that the player is always on edge, never sure what lies around the corner, reinforcing the feeling of isolation and dread that defines Haunting Ground as a standout among survival horror games. One of the most distinctive aspects of Haunting Ground is the dynamic relationship between Fiona and the ever-lovable dog Hewie. Hewie, her faithful German Shepherd companion in a genre often dominated by weapons and combat, allows Haunting Ground to take a different approach by making Hewie one of the most important tools for survival, shifting the focus from firepower to the bond between human and animal. This bond is not only central to the gameplay mechanics, but also serves as the emotional core of the narrative, making Hewie one of the most beloved and indispensable dogs in gaming history. Hewie isn't just a passive character, he is an active participant in nearly every aspect of the game. From the moment Fiona meets him, Hewie becomes her protector, guide, and even her emotional anchor. His role in the game extends far beyond that of a typical pet or sidekick. He is instrumental in helping Fiona survive the relentless stalkers that pursue her throughout the castle. Whether it's attacking enemies to buy Fiona precious seconds to escape, or sniffing out hidden items or clues, Hewie is involved in nearly every critical moment of gameplay. The game's mechanics revolve around Fiona's ability to command Hewie effectively, requiring the player to nurture and maintain a bond with him. If the players treat Hewie well, rewarding him for his efforts and praising him when he follows commands, Hewie becomes more loyal and responsive, making him more effective in combat and puzzle solving. The emotional connection between Fiona and Hewie is palpable, and it is this connection that makes this game so memorable. Players quickly grow attached to Hewie, at least I know I did, not just because of his utility, but because of his lovable personality. Unlike many other video game dogs who are portrayed as robotic or emotionless, Hewie feels like a living, breathing character. He will show affection towards Fiona, whimper in fear when danger is near, and growl menacingly at enemies. His loyalty to Fiona is heartwarming, and it is this emotional bond that adds a layer of humanity to the game that is often missing in other survival horror titles. When Fiona is in danger, Hewie is always there, ready to risk his life to protect her, and this creates a sense of companionship that is deeply affecting. What's particularly fascinating about Hewie's role in the game is how Hewie was designed by Capcom's usage of AI. Hewie is not a flawless, obedient dog who follows commands perfectly every time. He has his own personality, and this is reflected in how he behaves during gameplay. If he is injured or mistreated, Hewie might disobey command or act independently, adding a layer of realism and unpredictability to the game. This mechanic forces players to be mindful of how they treat him, reinforcing the idea that survival in Haunting Ground is not just about Fiona, it's about her and Hewie working together as a team. This dynamic sets Haunting Ground apart with other survival horror games and makes Hewie arguably the most important character in the game, where without him, Fiona's chances of survival would be slim, and it is this unique partnership that elevates Haunting Ground to a higher level of emotional depth and gameplay innovation. What truly sets Haunting Ground apart from its survival horror peers is its deeper exploration of psychological fear. A core component of the game's narrative and gameplay, the primary source of terror in Haunting Ground comes from its relentless stalkers, human-like antagonists who pursue Fiona throughout the game. Unlike traditional enemies in horror games, these stalkers cannot be easily defeated. They are omnipresent threats that require the player to constantly evade, hide, and strategize. This mechanic, known as the Stalker system, was a relatively new concept at the time and added a layer of tension that made the experience feel far more intimate and personal than the monster-based scares of other games. Each stalker of the Haunting Ground represents a different facet of psychological horror, and the unique designs and behaviors reflect the game's broader themes of control, power, and vulnerability. Debilitus, the towering, mentally disabled groundskeeper, is both pitiable and terrifying, embodying the fear of brute strength and physical domination. His childlike obsession with Fiona borders on disturbing, and his relentless pursuit creates an atmosphere of dread every time he appears. Daniela, the twisted maid who embodies cold, emotionless jealousy, brings a different kind of terror, a quieter, more insidious threat. Her blank expression and eerie calmness makes her a chilling antagonist as she methodically stalks Fiona with an unsettling composure. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of these stalkers is their unpredictability. They do not follow scripted patterns, which means they can appear at any time, forcing the player to stay high on alert. This randomness creates a constant sense of anxiety, as players never know when or where the next encounter will occur, with this attention being further heightened by the game's use of sound cues. The shift in music or the sudden silence can indicate that a stalker is nearby, leaving players to scramble for a hiding place. Once Fiona is spotted, the game's mechanics shift into high gear, forcing the player to either flee or find a way to momentarily incapacitate the pursuer. The feeling of being hunted is palpable, and it is this mechanic that makes Haunting Ground one of the most genuinely terrifying games I've ever experienced within the survival horror genre. The panic system further deepens the psychological horror of Haunting Ground. When Fiona is caught or cornered, she enters a state of panic, a unique mechanic that causes her to lose control over her actions. This mechanic simulates the overwhelming fear that one might experience in such a situation, making it harder for the player to escape or think clearly. The panic system that was added into this game adds an extra layer of realism to this game, as it reflects the human response to extreme fear. Instead of feeling like an invincible protagonist, players are forced to experience the vulnerability and helplessness that comes with being hunted by relentless pursuers. Incorporating both the stalker mechanic and the panic system, Haunting Ground masterfully explores the psychology of fear. By emphasizing Fiona's vulnerability and focusing on the psychological aspects of horror, the game creates an atmosphere of constant dread that makes every moment feel tense and unpredictable, where it's not just about survival, it's about maintaining control over fear and anxiety, and this is what makes Haunting Ground such a standout experience in the genre. Haunting Ground, despite its critical acclaim and inventive mechanics, never quite achieved the same level of mainstream popularity as other PS2-era survival horror games such as Resident Evil 4 or Silent Hill 2. Upon release, Haunting Ground was overshadowed by the heavy hitters of the genre, especially considering Capcom's simultaneous focus on its blockbuster Resident Evil franchise. Haunting Ground was a more niche title, lacking the brand recognition or massive marketing campaigns that helped catapult other survival horror games into the spotlight. It was also released during the twilight height of the PS2's life cycle, with the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 era on the horizon, which contributed to it slipping under the radar for many players at the time. However, while Haunting Ground may not have reached the same commercial heights of other PS2 survival horror titles, it has garnered a cult following over the years, with many fans and critics recognizing it as one of the most underrated games of its time. What makes Haunting Ground stand out even decades later is its commitment to creating a deeply immersive, atmospheric experience. The game's haunting visuals, tense cat-and-mouse gameplay, and psychological depth have aged remarkably well, giving it an enduring appeal that continues to attract new players who love horror games and horror-like experiences. It is a testament to the game's quality that, despite its initial low profile, Haunting Ground has become a beloved classic in survival horror circles, often praised for doing something different within the genre. Moreover, the game's niche status has only added to its mystique for many players, like myself, who discovered Haunting Ground. It feels like an uncovering of an hidden gem, a game that was ahead of its time in terms of ideas and execution, but its lack of mainstream success has arguably contributed to its legacy as a cult classic. The scarcity of physical copies and the fact it hasn't been re-released or remastered has only fueled this perception, making Haunting Ground a sought-after title for collectors and horror enthusiasts alike. Haunting Ground may not have been the blockbuster that other survival horror games of its generation were, but its legacy as one of the best survival horror titles of the past 2 decades, at least in my opinion, is undeniable. Through its carefully crafted atmosphere, unsettling psychological horror, and emotional connection between Fiona and the best boy Hewie, this game delivers a deeply immersive experience that sets it apart from other more action-focused titles of the era. It stands as a reminder that horror is not just about jump scares, it's about creating an emotional and psychological experience that lingers long after the game and the credits are finished. The bond between Fiona and Hewie adds a layer of heart and humanity to the game, a unique feature that elevates Haunting Ground beyond standard survival horror tropes. Together, they form a partnership that is not only key to survival, but also to the player's emotional investment in the game. It is this element of the game that has earned Haunting Ground its place in the hearts of mine and many others. In the end, Haunting Ground is not just a PS2 survival horror game, it is a masterclass in how to create tension, fear, and emotional depth within the genre. It stands tall among the greatest of survival horror games, not because of its commercial success, but because of the lasting impression it leaves on those who play it. Its haunting atmosphere, memorable characters, and the unique bond between Fiona and Hewie ensure that Haunting Ground will continue to be remembered as one of the best and most underappreciated survival horror experiences ever released.
Oh, track on my love.